Hey guys, Mark here from Ace Cart Gaming, and welcome back to Revisited, the series where we look to the past, pay our respects, and cast a critical eye over the games that started it all for our favourite freedom-fighting rodent. In the previous episode, along with my co-host, Nick from Game Apologist, I covered Sonic the Hedgehog 2 in full, carrying out a deep dive analysis on the game where most fans agree everything clicked for the first time. See, agreement can occur in this fanbase, once every 30 years, but in this video, in what could be one of the best examples ever of a tough act to follow, we'll be covering the Sonic 3 portion of Sonic 3 and Knuckles. I think we all know at this stage that the combined game, Sonic 3 and Sonic & Knuckles, was always the intended experience. The true and complete vision the developers had for what would become one of the most significant games in the entire series. If only pesky things like money, marketing deals, and release schedules weren't a thing. And to honour this vision, I'll be covering Sonic 3 and Sonic & Knuckles as one title. But, just to make sure I do the game justice, and show equal love to both of its parts, sounded wrong, I'll be splitting this retrospective across two videos. Taking a leaf out of Sega's book, in part 1 we'll cover the content on the Sonic 3 cartridge, and in part 2 we'll cover the second half of the game on the Sonic & Knuckles cartridge. This game will always be extremely special to me, and the significance it holds, I often have a really hard time putting into words. But what I will say without exaggeration is this: I don't think I would be the Sonic fan I am today were it not for Sonic 3 and Knuckles. Don't get me wrong, I love the beautiful experiment, the thrill seeker's paradise, the explorer's dream, and the majority of what came after. But Sonic 3 and Knuckles is where I feel all of these aspects came together best, and the series well and truly sank its hooks into this awestruck kid, where I would have gladly traded in the real world for a chance to explore this amazing floating enigma, where spare moment in class were filled with thoughts of what the rest of Hidden Palace might look like, where I would look to find anything Sonic in everyday life, whether that be rocks on the beach that resembled Chaos Emeralds, places in the world that no doubt inspired locations in the game, or even parts of the coastline that looked to my little kid eyes like Angel Island resting on the water's surface. As a kid of a certain variety, Sonic 3 and Knuckles just hit different. And in this video, as well as part 2, I'll attempt to justify why I feel that Sonic 3 and Knuckles is the pinnacle of 2D Sonic games. Or maybe even the whole series. But just as a quick word before we jump into the good stuff, if for any strange reason you find yourself actually enjoying the video, please consider dropping a like on it and maybe even subscribing to the channel. I cover an insane amount of Sonic and gaming stuff on here, so there's always a good chance there'll be something you'll enjoy. And any support you guys show really helps the channel, and I can't put into words just how much it's appreciated by me. You guys are awesome. And with that e-begging and no modest amount of hyperbole about the game out of the way, let's get started, shall we? Apparently, some people found Sonic's design for this title screen a little creepy. His giant bulbous bobblehead staring, waving his giant 3D finger at you disapprovingly, winking suggestive. I never really got that, to be honest, but that's probably because me and this guy were tight. Dude used to wash my hair, for Christ's sake. He's alright. After the title screen, we are greeted right away with one of the biggest quality of life changes introduced in Sonic 3. A fully integrated and user-friendly save system. You can now easily create and manage multiple save games that track and store your progress. No more memorizing sound test codes, passwords for level selects, or being forced into the options screen just to pick your character. All of this is now available in one handy place, and your game is now saved automatically at the end of each zone, or when you exit a special stage. A save feature was something a lot of people were screaming for back in the day. For a lot of kids, these games were friggin' hard, and there was nothing more soul-destroying than getting a game over after spending your whole day reaching the same place you died before just to die there again. Not to mention how difficult it could be to collect all the Chaos Emeralds only to then game over before seeing the true ending. Whether it was just a cost of cartridges that included batteries for save games, laziness, or just something they hadn't thought about before, this was a very welcome addition. and with the developers' big plans for storytelling and universe expansion in this game, probably a necessity. When you connect Sonic 3 with Sonic and Knuckles, and form the tower of power that is Sonic 3 and Knuckles, as well as Sonic and Tails, you can also play as Knuckles. We'll go over the inclusion of Knuckles, his playstyle, and how the game is different when using him in Part 2. But for now, we'll stick with Sonic and cover the changes made to Tails since Sonic 2. So, let's friggin' go! Right from the get-go, that focus on storytelling by Naka and his team is front and center, as we see Sonic and Tails fly out to investigate a strange floating island that crashed into the ocean, causing a tidal wave to hit the mainland and surrounding islands. Series continuity is also firmly established here, with this game directly following on from the good ending of Sonic 2, where Sonic had collected all 7 Chaos Emeralds and discovered his super form. Sonic, still in possession of the Chaos Emeralds, jumps from the tornado to fly himself across the shallows in his super form, while Tails lands the plane. He is then caught completely off guard, running face first into some cold, hard universe expansion, and we are introduced to Big Red for the first time. My peeps in North America were like, holy shit, it's that peeping Tom from the bushes. I'd recognize those leering eyes anywhere. What's this creep's problem? And everyone else was like, oh cool, the new guy from the front of the box. But in all seriousness, as introductions go, Knuckles straight up knocks Sonic out of his super form the second he lays eyes on him. And if first impressions are everything, Knuckles has some boss level methods of saying hi. With the power of the Chaos Emeralds, Sonic is impervious to pretty much all damage, so what Knuckles did here is incredibly impressive. And back in the day, you definitely knew this guy meant business. The impact knocks the 7 Chaos Emeralds out of Sonic's grasp, causing him to lose his super form. And while he's staggering around in a daze, Knuckles quickly gathers them up and makes his getaway. We just watched the blue blur, the fastest thing alive, get mugged, bitch slapped out of his super form, and left lost and bewildered in this strange new place. That's a lot of information to fit into a 22-second wordless scene. And that's just awesome. Sonic is now left with no option but to pursue his attacker further inland, if he wants to get the Chaos Emeralds back, and find out just what exactly is going on here. As the first zone in Sonic games go, Angel Island Zone is quite different to any that have come before. I mean, sure, it's green, but there's certainly no mistaking it for Green Hill, or its speedier Emerald cousin. Everything looks so overgrown, primitive, giving the impression that nothing has been touched here for a long time. This zone does a great job at letting you know that you are no longer in familiar territory. This strange, slumbering land has long been undisturbed, but is now starting to shift and awaken with the presence of intruders. And as a kid, nothing intrigued me more than the idea of somehow leaving the restricted 2D plane the game took place on, and walking out into the backgrounds to explore. This was probably partly because the art style had been completely upgraded for this game, and boy is it beautiful. All character models have now been given a slightly 3D look, with a lot of extra attention given to the level of detail and their animation. And I'm probably in the minority of people who much prefer these sprites to anything that came before or after. But it's the environment where the real beauty lies. The level of detail achieved is just staggering when you consider the hardware this game was running on. Each area feels like a living, breathing place. There's even an attempt to add textures and drop shadow here and there, and the backgrounds are truly something to behold. And this game will squeeze absolutely everything it can out of them to help build atmosphere and communicate its narrative. Like all good first levels in a Sonic game, Angel Island is designed to teach you the fundamentals, and to serve as a sandbox to practice your skills. Falling from the upper path isn't punished with a death pit or anything, usually just a slightly more cumbersome path or some shallow water to wade through. Speaking of skills though, the awesome spin dash from Sonic 2 makes a return, and is just as useful this time around. But new to Sonic's abilities is his insta-shield, where if jump is pressed again in mid-air, a white flash of energy will surround him. At first, the purpose of this was far from obvious to most people, but once you catch on, this is actually an insanely useful ability. The flash slightly extends Sonic's reach, allowing him to hit enemies from slightly further away, as well as granting a split second of invincibility. And this can be an absolute lifesaver against bosses with funky hitboxes, and for destroying enemies protected by spikes. As for Tails, I didn't hold back on this little guy in Sonic 2 for his lack of utility, but I'm glad to say that's all changed this time round. Tails can now fly temporarily, even when player controlled. He'll eventually get tired and slowly fall back down to the ground, but another really handy thing about this is that Tails can even use this to give Sonic a lift whenever he needs it, with this mechanic even forming the basis for a later boss fight. Tails' flight is very useful for exploring, making it much easier to find secrets and special stages that Sonic could never easily reach by himself, effectively making him in easy mode should you choose to play as him by himself. The little guy can even swim, performing a cute little doggy paddle if jump is pressed again while underwater. Tails is a little Swiss Army knife in this game, which just further demonstrates that the developers were always looking to make improvements to the games, and were taking the feedback from fans on board. More importantly though, Sonic 3 and Knuckles provides huge incentives to use all of these new abilities, leaning heavily into the theme of exploration. In most zones, regardless of the route you pick, there are secrets to be found up higher or hidden out of sight below. You can push piles of boulders out of the way and break into secret caverns full of rings and power-ups, or use your spin dash to break through walls of rock to find cave systems that, if you're lucky, might just contain this game's giant special stage rings. You probably recognize these giant rings from Sonic 1. And they serve exactly the same purpose here, but instead of bringing 50 rings to the end of the act to spawn them, they are instead hidden all over the place, which feeds into this game's whole ethos of encouraging and rewarding exploration. It's not cumbersome or painful like it could be sometimes in Sonic CD, and is also entirely optional. But for the eager beaver explorers among us, this could often be the difference between collecting all the emeralds by the end of the second zone and scrambling to cobble them all together much later. The special stages in the Sonic series on the Mega Genesis Drive have always pushed the boundaries of what was possible visually on 16-bit hardware, and Sonic 3 and Knuckles is no different. Like in Sonic 2, the camera shifts behind Sonic to a third-person perspective, but instead of a
whole-ass half-pipe,
you have to work your way around a giant globe, collecting blue spheres while avoiding the red ones. If you thought Super Sonic's likeness to Super Saiyans would be the last Dragon Ball reference this series had to offer, you would be mistaken, as Yuji Naka apparently drew his inspiration for the design of these stages from watching Dragon Ball. You are told in no uncertain terms right at the beginning what your objective is: get blue spheres. Apparently this was initially written as get blue balls, but this was changed during focus testing for obvious reasons. As I said, collect every blue sphere on the grid, avoiding the red ones as they immediately boot you from the stage, and one of the stolen mystical rainbow nuggets is yours once again. Reception of these special stages is quite mixed among fans, but I'm going to try and justify why I feel that they're actually the best special stages in all the classic Sonic games. The biggest difference between these special stages and what came before is that there is virtually no look or memorization required to complete them. Sure, knowing them makes it easier, that's only natural, but the special stages in the original game were very look-based. Even knowing them well, you can still get a bad rebound off a bumper and fail the stage. Not to mention blind forks that can be the difference between succeeding and failing on your first time. The special stages in Sonic 2 were pretty much completely based on memorization. While not as look-based as the first game, having to memorize them all through trial and error was really annoying as a kid, and with no save system, getting all 7 could be a huge pain in the ass. Once you know the rules, the bonus stages in Sonic 3 and Knuckles are actually quite fair, and completing them is solely based on your skill and reaction times as opposed to luck or memory. Collecting every blue sphere appears at first to require you to carefully navigate the large clusters in such a way that you won't trap yourself and hit a red sphere, as each blue sphere collected will turn red. But once you figure out the perimeter trick and turn the large grids of spheres into rings, the game really opens up and lets you choose how you want to tackle these stages. If you manage collecting all the rings in a special stage, you will get a perfect bonus. This nets you a huge score and grants an extra life. You can then balance collecting all the rings versus the increased difficulty of the ever-increasing speed. The longer you stay in a special stage, the faster Sonic will go. So you need to balance your priorities of successfully obtaining your Chaos Emerald against the temptation to collect rings for points and continues. The later stages have a natural increase in difficulty as your ability to jump becomes required. These special stages always seem to me to take inspiration from the 3 pillars that make a great Sonic game: speed, platforming, and exploration. You need to manage your speed as you spend time in them, work on your platforming and timing as you move around and jump over obstacles, and you can explore for every last ring, if you're brave enough. You can tackle these special stages in whichever way suits you, and I always loved seeing that sense of self-expression the main game allows for being adapted into the special stages. Once you master these concepts and exert your mad skills over these blue balls across 7 special stages, Sonic regains his super form. Once back in Angel Island Zone, regardless of whether you take the upper or lower path, you eventually come to a hollowed out tree that Sonic has to run up to progress. And at the top, we get our next narrative set piece. Robotnik now knows Sonic is here, and has summoned a fleet of Flamecraft bombers from the mainland. Sonic comes face to face with one as the fleet sets the whole zone ablaze, in an attempt to ensure you can't escape a fiery demise. When the wall of flame disappears, the Flamecraft is gone, and this lush, green jungle paradise you've been enjoying is now burning down around you. This game does an amazing job of using the background to help tell its story. And the first time you saw that fleet of bombers flying overhead, and that wall of flame rising up around you, that was truly special back in '94. And lighting a whole jungle on fire just on the off chance he would kill Sonic really helped show just how badass Robotnik was. Love this guy. The whole aesthetic of the zone changing based on story or progression really helped add to the feeling that this was a living, breathing place, and that everything is interconnected, not just isolated zones separated by loading screens. And this tactic is deployed throughout the game to great effect. Another new addition to the series is the elemental shields. Rather than just offering an extra hit like in previous games, these new shields apply different elements to your character, and in Sonic's case, offer a range of new abilities as well. The magnet shield has the appearance of a globe of lightning surrounding Sonic, and gives him the awesome ability to perform a second jump while in mid-air by discharging a burst of electricity, as well as the passive ability to attract rings with his magnetic pull. This shield is awesome, probably one of my favorites, with the only real downside being that you lose it when submerged in water. Speaking of shields that are lost in water, the second shield is the Flame Shield. This gives Sonic the ability to launch himself forward in a burst of fire, and has the added benefit of making him invulnerable to lava and flame-based attacks. And lastly, the Bubble Shield. This shield gives Sonic the ability to perform a bounce attack, which can be useful for reaching higher areas or crushing enemies directly below. But the most important benefit of this shield is that it gives Sonic the ability to breathe underwater, and while that's not crucial in this zone, it becomes a godsend later in the game. But shields, special stages, and knuckle glove wearing thieves are not all that's changed in Sonic 3. Unlike all previous games, Act 1 is no longer a gimme, and you now have a mini-boss to fight at the end of the first act of every zone. And look who it is, the pyromaniacal Flamecraft from earlier. Even against this first mini-boss, you will already see that which elemental shield you bring into these fights will be really important, as if you held on to the flame shield, its flamethrower can't damage you, enabling you to quickly destroy it before it can rise up and drop any bombs. As I mentioned before, the transition from Act 1 to Act 2 is now seamless, and Sonic picks up right where he left off to speed through the burning jungle in search of Robotnik. Even the music is switched up for Act 2 of each zone, and in the case of Angel Island, things take on a much more urgent feel, matching Sonic's race through this burning tropical paradise. Another great example of game design is this section of Act 2 that pretty much forces you to discover a special stage ring. Yeah, there were 2 before this for any eager explorers among us, but in case you didn't find these, this is the game's way of letting you know that slowing down from time to time to look around can be quite beneficial. Sonic 3 continues the trend started in Sonic 2 with its huge emphasis on speed, with its rows of loop-de-loops and ramps that launch you over huge chasms. These speed sections are paced really well, and their placements between the more platforming and exploration-based sections just make sense and flow really well. With some practice, Sonic can keep a blistering pace through the entire zone. The stage design continues to push the idea that this island hasn't been touched for a long time, as even progression along the correct path often requires Sonic to break down walls of rock or activate hidden switches to move forward. If you thought the pressure from Robotnik would end with the napalm strikes, you have another thing coming, as you are pursued relentlessly across an open field by one of his airships as it tries to bomb you to oblivion. I believe this is supposed to be the flying battery, but it looks very different to the one we see in the Sonic and Knuckles portion of the game. And I know these 2 sections were obviously developed in isolation to each other in terms of their final versions, and that flying battery was initially supposed to follow Carnival Night, but you would think whichever came later would conform to the original. It's 2021 and I'm still being left to ponder about elements of this game. And frankly, that's just awesome. After escaping the airship, you spot Robotnik briefly in the background, signaling the imminent boss fight ahead. Yet another example of the game making great use of the background to build tension and tell its story. As with the mini-boss, the Flame Shield is once again extremely useful for this encounter, as all of Robotnik's attacks are fire-based as well. Without it, you need to be a little more on your toes and land your hits while dodging fireballs as the boss periodically emerges from behind the waterfall. The bosses in Sonic games up to this point were always fairly nukeable. Quite often, you could beat them before things even really got going. But I always liked the variety of approach Sonic 3 and Knuckles provides. If you were good enough at the game to hold on to the relevant shield, yeah, you can pretty easily beat most of the bosses. But if you don't, most of them have sufficient tactics, or are only vulnerable for a limited period of time, so as to stop you from immediately destroying them like before. After the boss, Knuckles makes his presence felt once again, as he activates a switch to drop Sonic into the next zone, all while performing the 5-knuckle chuckle. Pfft, Knuckles the echidna. More like Switchels the giggling douchebag, am I right? I always love that for whatever reason, the game returns control of Sonic to you just as the bridge is destroyed, giving you the opportunity to use a magnet shield and a little determination to reach this maniacal, chuckling little bastard. You can't slap his smug face or yeet his ass off a cliff just yet, so it's time to move on. Sonic is plunged unceremoniously straight into the watery depths of Hydrocity. Now, I'm a pretty open-minded guy, so you can call it Hydrocity if you want, but you'd be wrong. So, it's a pretty brave move for Sega to have the second zone in the game be a water stage. Labyrinth was, let's just say, disliked by most, and even Chemical Plant often loses points with people for its inclusion of watery death pits, despite how good the rest of the zone is. But here, things have changed in a big way, and you might see a pattern here. I'm going to explain why I think that Sonic 3 and Knuckles features by far the best water segments in the classic games. Sega have learned their mistakes from the first Sonic game, so Hydrocity will not be entirely underwater. You will find yourself constantly shifting in and out of the wet stuff for far more than just an oxygen break, and this stage does not hold back in the speed department either. Regardless of whether you're underwater or not, there are loads of opportunities to tear the place up, with Sonic even able to pull a friggin' Jesus as he rips across the water's surface like a rocket. It's just an awesome flourish of detail, and even as such a simple concept, this just blew me away as a kid. You spent the entirety of Labyrinth Zone dreading even the sight of liquid, praying to anyone who'd listen for some reprieve. Yet here you are now, running across the stuff like it's no big deal. It really adds to the idea that Sonic is always learning, constantly improving his skills, and it certainly doesn't hurt in the coolness department either. Smug little shit. But he has every reason to be smug, doesn't he? Little bugger is awesome, and he knows it. Sonic 2 cut the water sections to a minimum, pretty much walking on eggshells in terms of its inclusion in the game at all. Sonic 3 and Knuckles takes the bull by the horns and actually sets out to incorporate water into the high-speed platforming formula. The underwater sections are often as fast-paced as the land-based ones, and the few slightly slower sections are littered with clusters of air bubbles. And with the bubble shield allowing you to breathe underwater, these sections are just a breeze. Sure, there are some slightly pace-breaking stage gimmicks, like the spinning cylinders and retracting fans, but these are, quite frankly, meaningless in the grand scheme of the zone, and more so just serve as a quick breather from the face-melting speed of the rest of the zone. But if you're someone who prefers to take your time and explore for secrets, Hydrocity has you covered too. There is a metric buttload of special stage rings and power-ups hidden all over the place for you to find. Naka and his team did a great job with the water sections in this game, and you really have to tip your hat to them for not simply giving up on water completely, which they pretty much did in Sonic 2. Instead, they decided to include more water in this game than any that came before, with only one zone in the first 6 not having any water in it at all. Towards the end of the zone, Switchels has to get his little switch fetish out of his system, and drops you into the watery pit that contains our next boss fight. And this guy is another great example of how the bosses in this game offer you a variety of ways to approach them. Based on your skills and confidence level, you can opt to wait for him to lower down to get off a few safer hits while avoiding the whirlpool. You can be bold and use his bombs to reach him even when he's up high. Or you can use the bubble shield to smash the bejesus out of him. Dealer's choice. And I know these bosses are nothing to series veterans, and most of you probably don't even have to think about it when you fight them. But I don't think the bosses in this game get enough credit for the level of variety they offer newcomers. With Robotnik defeated, Sonic is swiftly hydro-pumped into the next zone. Marble Garden Zone has all the surface qualities of a great zone. Super interesting ancient city ruins aesthetic? Check. Loads of steep slopes for blistering speed? Check. Interesting boss mechanics? Check. But there is just something about this zone that always slightly takes the wind out of my sails on any new playthrough. The music is a bit dull and slightly zaps your energy, and the zone gimmicks, like the spinning tops, face statues, pulleys, and spin dash mechanisms, all drain any sense of fun or speed from the stage. And they're so painfully common that you constantly find yourself going, ugh, this crap again. And the stage's traps and badniks are equally cheap and annoying. If you don't know the stage well, you will find yourself constantly running face first into huge spinning maces and these floating spike guys, not to mention the amount of crushing spike pillars. And again, they're all absolutely everywhere. The only real saving grace is that there are plenty of special stage rings hidden throughout. So if you haven't gotten all 7 Chaos Emeralds yet and you like to explore, you at least have that to fall back on. And if you're a weird locale nerd like me, the second act sees you head further into the heart of a ruined city, and you get to explore that for a bit. But beyond that, it's really hard to find many positives. I was always slightly in denial about my indifference to this zone, and whenever I heard others complaining about it, I'd often kinda dismiss it, thinking, nah, it's not that bad. But the more I thought about it, it was always the point in a playthrough where there would be that slight urge to stop playing. Marble Garden is a blip in an otherwise awesome experience, and it only takes thinking about what lies ahead to refocus the brain and keep my eye on the prize. The boss fight in this zone is also a little unconventional and sees you take on Robotnik in an aerial battle with the help of Tails. Unfortunately, the pace of this fight is completely dictated by the boss, and you'll spend most of your time waiting around for an opening. And if you miss said opening, you'll be waiting around more. If you are quick enough at the very start though, you can land a good chunk of the required hits on him before he even takes off, leaving much less for you to do in mid-air. Once Robotnik is defeated, it's thankfully time to move on. Carnival Night Zone, Sonic 3's updated version of Casino Night, now gambling free. Aesthetically, this zone always struck me as the most out-of-place stage in the game, and there are multiple theories about its purpose and origin. Some say that this was actually the latest creation of the now extinct Echidna tribe, and that Knuckles kept the place going out of some weird obligation or boredom. Others say that Robotnik built this place, and that he's been using it as a base to refuel his machines and airships. Both of these seem kinda crazy to me, as if the ancestors of Knuckles built it, why does it look nothing like anything else you find anywhere on the island? And while Robotnik building it does make more sense, how did he build it so quickly? Didn't he only recently arrive here? And if he did build it as a refueling station, why create it in a carnival theme? There aren't exactly many creatures inhabiting the island, so who was supposed to pay to use it? Anyway, as I said, this is the one zone that makes very little narrative sense, and is obviously just here to cash in on the success of Casino Night. So we'll just have to roll with it. Along with all the shiny lights, this zone also introduces a host of new platforming and physics-based gimmicks to the equation. Spring bumpers will both aid and hinder your progress, balloons can be popped as temporary springs, and anti-gravity tubes will pull you in and launch you upwards. Carnival Night spends about half the time whizzing you around at top speed, throwing you around the place with lots of fun set pieces, and the other half with slower paced, more cumbersome gimmicks, and underwater sections to trudge through. We have our good friend Switchels to thank for that last one, as he causes a blackout and floods the lower areas. Soon afterward, we reach the infamous Barrel of Doom, the bane of a lot of people's existence the first time they reach this zone. I legit have no significant memories of this barrel. Never even really thought much about this section before I seen so many people talking about it. And the only analysis I can offer here is that the issue seems to rest somewhere between poor communication by the game around the mechanics, and one of the unfortunate drawbacks of so many path options, meaning a lot of people avoided earlier examples like this one, that pretty much required the same thing, only upwards. Yeah, that's right, I'm gonna sit on the fence here and be totally neutral about how shit this mechanic is. And while it's never explained, there's not much of a trick here.
There's no trick to it. It's just a simple trick.
Just alternate holding up and down in time with the barrel and you'll eventually be able to progress. Sure, most of you guys and gals were probably born with a Mega Genesis Drive controller in your hand, so I've no idea why I'm even telling you any of this. You're preaching to the choir again, Mark. You're preaching to the choir. The only real drawbacks to this zone for me is that it slightly overstays its welcome. This zone is long, and I know a lot of people feel that way about Sandopolis, but nah, for me, Carnival Night is a far worse offender. We finish up the zone with Sonic pulling a MacGyver on a cannon to precision launch himself to the next zone.
MacGyver, 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 MacGyver.
Ice Cap starts with that awesome set piece where Sonic snowboards down a snowy mountainside, with this segment actually going on to feature in loads of promotional material and inspire gameplay ideas in multiple future titles. There isn't exactly a whole lot of player interaction required here, but that doesn't matter. The spectacle was always awesome enough by itself to rank high in the memories of most. And besides the god-level music, it's always this segment that comes to mind whenever I think of Ice Cap. This zone is a strong favourite among many a Sonic 3 fan, and for very good reason. As I said, the music for this zone is on another level. Probably one of the most memorable tracks in the whole series. Friggin' Jetsons and their hard times. I'm fully prepared to see this song removed from the Origins version because of this. And it's really hard to hate Hard Times for it, because it also bangs. Ice Cap also accomplishes something very rare in 2D gaming. A really fun ice level. There's no annoying slipping or sliding physics applied to Sonic, and for the most part you can just run through the snow unimpeded. That's not to say there's no ice-based hazards or obstacles. There are plenty of sliding slopes, giant falling icicles, and freeze traps spread throughout the stage. But besides the icicles being a bit of a pace breaker, the rest of the zone is a pure face melter, and on balance, these slower sections can serve as a nice breather between all the sliding, running, and rolling around at full tilt. And I always loved the transition from Act 1 to Act 2 in this zone. Moving from inside the icy cave systems out into the open air and admiring the beautiful frozen vista, with giant glaciers and sheets of ice floating on the water in the background. Besides the yellow snow machine in Act 1, it's really just Robotnik's Freeze-O-Matic you have to worry about in this zone. This boss can actually be quite tricky without an elemental shield or invincibility, due to his alternating freeze patterns periodically blocking his weak points. This is one of those times having Tails with you really pays off, as he can actually rescue you whenever you get frozen. After the fight, Sonic does some spherical tunnel sledding and makes his way to the next zone. Launch Base Zone is exactly what it sounds like. This is where the Death Egg crash landed after Sonic 2, and you can now see it looming over you in the background as you make your way through Act 1. Robotnik has built his base of operations here, and there are huge support struts all around the Death Egg to facilitate repairs. As you make your way through the zone, you'll notice another awesome example of the game using the background to create atmosphere and tell its story, as you get closer and closer to the Death Egg as you move forward. As for the zone itself, Launch Base definitely wouldn't be up there with the most difficult final zones in 2D Sonic. The setting, atmosphere, and more serious music all tell the story of a final zone, but the difficulty is actually more on the casual side, and the level design allows for some really nice speed sections, making great use of gimmicks like these U-bend style pipes that shoot you around at speed to help balance the pace against the slower precision-based sections, where badnik placements can sometimes be a bit tricky, but a far cry from the likes of Scrap Brain or Metropolis. But I think we all know why Launch Base feels like such a phantom last stage. It was never actually supposed to be the last stage. As the complete experience goes, it's actually only the midway point in the story. And when these two pieces were so unceremoniously separated from each other, this naturally caused some teething issues, with the pacing of the story and stage difficulty at the end of Sonic 3 and the very beginning of Sonic & Knuckles feeling ever so slightly off. But I'd argue that despite all of this, these issues are so small as to be negligible, and I actually take my hat off to the team for making things work as well as they did. Switchels, who up until now has mostly been just pulling childish pranks on you, seriously ups his game here at the end of Act 1, as he lobs a fucking Wile E. Coyote style bomb at you. We've had Robotnik nuking a whole jungle just on the off chance he might kill Sonic, and now we have Big Red doing building demolitions just to pop the blue pincushion. This is your island, dude! Why are you laughing? Act 2 sees us move much closer to the Death Egg. No longer can we see the scaffolds and cranes, as these now form parts of the stage. We are actually now in the middle of the lake from the background of Act 1, directly below the slumbering space station. This is yet another example of how Sonic 3 doesn't shy away from the water taboo, instead successfully incorporating it into the formula with some pretty fun underwater sections. After beating Robotnik's ball shooter, no joke, that's actually what it's called, Sonic goes for a quick joyride in his Eggmobile. But as we get closer to the Death Egg, we're pulled over by Chuckles. You're so lucky this game's in 2D or I'd fly round your ass. After the high of detonating a bomb and demolishing a building, Knuckles' bloodlust is off the charts. And as the final stage in this part of the game, he stands ready to take Sonic down for good. What sort of amazing power will he unleash? What the fuck? All that build up and he just throws a random frustration slap at the Eggmobile, knocking it back a whole 4 inches, only to end up knocked into the drink by the launching Death Egg. You can only go up from rock bottom, dude! Stay positive! Once we catch up with the Death Egg, it's finally time for the last boss of the Sonic 3 portion of the game. The big, no consent required arm machine, and our ears are blessed with probably the best non-vocal boss theme in the series. That feeling when you see Robotnik quickly drop down in the background, coupled with the sky going dark and that badass music playing, that atmosphere was just awesome. Remember getting chills back in the day. Compared to the final boss in Sonic 2, you should have a much easier time here. Robotnik periodically sweeps the screen from either side, and this is your best opening to safely land a hit. Just avoid the spikes on top and being grabbed by the arms, landing hits on the windshield and you should be fine. While not a very difficult final encounter compared to Sonic 2, the pattern is still pretty satisfying, and if you didn't manage keeping any rings from the boss gauntlet before, you only have one chance. But if you do feel a bit underwhelmed by this fight, just remember that this was never intended to be the last boss, and is actually removed from Sonic's story altogether in the combined game. Sonic 3 ends with him once again foiling the launch of Robotnik's Death Egg, and after a few short scenes showing this mustachioed behemoth crashing back down onto Angel Island, the end credits start to roll, with a lot less pomp and frill compared to the endings of the previous games. And while none of us knew it at the time, this truly was an end of part 1, as opposed to the end of the story. Even though Sonic 3 factually was an incomplete experience, you really never would have known this back in '94. And sure, with the benefit of hindsight, there are lots of little peculiarities and oddities that now make sense when you realize this is actually a best ever cut of a story that hasn't been fully told yet. A loving patch job by passionate people who knew these characters and the story they wanted to tell. Sure, Sonic 3 has less zones than Sonic 2, but they were up to 3 times larger, and you could explore them in a variety of different ways, with all the new character abilities the game introduces. Not to mention the new focus on narrative and universe expansion, with the introduction of more complex characters and locations, each with their own lore and backstories. And as the icing on the cake, the visuals even got a complete revamp, and this game is just beautiful in every department. This is why in '94 you didn't really hear any complaints about the game being too short or feeling incomplete. And on a personal level, it also probably helped that this was the time in my childhood where Sonic just exploded in popularity, and his universe was further expanded in awesome ways in both the comics and the cartoon series. The Fleetway comics in particular tied in perfectly with Sonic 3 and Knuckles, and had loads of cool stories that expanded the lore around the events of the game. And just before you wonder why Fleetway, this was all that was available to us poor Irish freedom fighters back in the day. It wasn't until much later that I even realised other comic iterations existed. But this all likely contributes to my view that this is the first half of the best 2D Sonic game of all time. But I hope that I also did a halfway decent job of explaining how this game stands tall and proud on its own 2 feet as well. And as things stand, we still have the entirety of the second half to enjoy when we cover the Sonic and Knuckles portion of the game, and all the amazing gameplay, locations, lore and story building that somehow only increase in awesomeness in that part of the game. Somehow it's still all up from here, and by the time it's all over, I hope to have made a case for how this game helped define the series, shaping a lot of what came after, even in the third dimension. But what about you guys? What are some of your best, or if you're one of those people, worst experiences with this game? Whether they be in either half or the combined experience. I want to hear all of your thoughts in the comments below. Were you a day 1 16-bit player? Or did you discover this game on one of the many collections that followed? I love to hear all different perspectives, so please do speak up in the comments. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Apologies about the runtime, but I just have so much to say about this game, and frankly, I'm surprised we even got it this short. And remember, if you enjoyed the video and found the content interesting, please consider subscribing and throwing a like on the video. I make lots of deep dive analysis videos on Sonic characters and the series lore, as well as reviews and retrospectives on Sonic games, and from time to time other games too. So if any of this sounds interesting to you and you'd like to show your support, hit that subscribe button. All of your subs, likes and comments really help the channel, and each and every one of them is hugely appreciated. But for now, a big thank you for watching. And as always guys, take care.